This is a release I've been waiting for a very, very long time. It might sound silly that I'm as excited as I am about a form library, but this is an exciting form library, okay? Doing forms has never been particularly easy, especially in tools like React. And as great as things like React Hook Form are, they're not modern, is the best I can put it. There have been so many improvements in everything from client server-side behaviors to type safety to validation that React Hook Form has kept up with. But in their own words, it's been getting old for almost 4 years now. And this is a tweet from over 2 years ago. The React Hook Form guys built something incredible, and I will forever be thankful for them and their shepherding of the ecosystem. But I'm also really fond of Tanner, as well as Crutchcorn, who's been helping lead a lot of these efforts. And after 2 years, Tanstack Form V1 is finally here and ready to go. I want to play the video that Tanner made, but it has copywritten music, which means I might get sued, and those bills are expensive, so we need to figure out how to pay those. As always, best bets, probably going to be a sponsor spot, so we'll be right back. If you're anything like me, you're tired of all these AI companies saying they're going to replace developers with robots. They're not. They're absolutely not. But it's also kind of ignorant to pretend they won't help. Today's sponsor, CodeRabbit, is really good at that helping part. They review your code. They're not replacing code review, but they're augmenting it and making it better. In this PR, where I'm changing how rate limits work in T3 chat, it drew up a summary for every file that I touched. It made a sequence diagram for all the flows that were affected, like an actual good, useful flow chart here. Like, what? Never would have thought a bot could do that for me. Pulled up related PRs, but then it left an actual code review where I started going through my code, leaving feedback, and proposing actual useful stuff. Mark called some things out here too, but he was really impressed. My CTO even said there was a bug in here. Let me find it. Here, where it caught an actual regression and how we were handling rate limiting of paid users versus free users. I was doing a bad sum and making a bad comparison, and it caught something we almost certainly would have missed before this went live, which is kind of crazy to think that for $15 a month, we just prevented a potentially huge outage. If you want an AI that's actually practical and not threatening to replace you, you should definitely give CodeRabbit a look. Check them out today for free at soydev.link/CodeRabbit. Sorry about that. Anyways, while you were gone, I watched this, and as much as I love Tanner, we don't need the AI slop stock footage that was used here, so we'll just read the launch stuff. Tanstack Form. Headless, performant, and type-safe form state management for TypeScript and JavaScript, but also for frameworks like React, Vue, Angular, Solid, and Lit. Stop crying over your forms with a return to simplicity, composability, and type safety with Tanstack Form. Sporting a tiny footprint, 0 depths, framework-agnostic core, and a granular type-safe API, Tanstack Form is the perfect combination of simplicity and power that you need to build forms fast with peace of mind. Super excited about this. Specifically, the idea that this is the first form library that's really happened in the deep TypeScript era. The first TypeScript era was having a types file in definitely typed. Second TypeScript era was embedding those types natively into your package so that you could use them to maintain things better. And then the final era, where we're on, I shouldn't say final, the era we're in right now, is using inference and validation heavily to make type safety go beyond the function you're calling. Bit of history. It was nearly 2 years ago when I saw Tanner's Blue Sky post that he was working on a new project, Tanstack Form. God, it's crazy. This was almost 2 years ago now. And fun history lesson here. Corbin was actually working on his own form management library, Houseform, and joined almost immediately to help Tanner instead, and then became one of the lead contributors to Tanstack Form and largely led the efforts. At the time, Corbin had Houseform and was immediately enamored, fortunate enough to attend a hackathon that Tanner was also going to soon after. That was the Clerk Office hackathon. That was a really fun opportunity to dive in and see them hacking. And they got some time to work on integrating some APIs from Houseform into the project. Since that time, Tanner's handed much of the reins of Form over to him and a wonderful group of additional maintainers. So what have they built? Features. One of the advantages of being in the oven for so long is that Tanstack Form launches with a flurry of features that you can leverage day one. Here's a few. Type safety. Const form equals use form. Default values. Name, empty string. Age 0. Now you can render form.field with name, first name, and it will tell you that's not a valid field. Form.field name is name. Children is field number input. TypeScript will correctly tell you that name is a string, not a number. So this will error as well. Form field name age validators. You can even add a validator on the form field itself. So here we're going to make a change where it returns too young true on change if the value is less than 12. And now we have the number input, And Tanstack will correctly tell you that error map on change is an object, not a string. And here it will let you populate those errors. That's really cool. It's cool that this is field-based, separate from form validation. So this lets you embed something in the UI here while separately tracking the form validation. So here we have the user schema, has age, which is a number that's greater than or equal to 13, has a custom error, all using Zod. By the way, it works with all the standard schema compliant schema validation libraries, which is Zod, Valibot, and Archetype, and theoretically more in the future. I think the effect type thing will work here as well. We have useForm, default value, validators, onChange, user schema, form.field, name, age, children. That's it. There's even async validation. So we can handle this with an abort signal-based cancellation, a validator, onBlur async, and here, const current age is we fetch the current age on profile with the signal, and the signal is passed here so we can cancel and debounce during that. That's really nice to have that built in, so I don't have to do a bunch of work to pass a signal to do abort. It just has it baked in. Not only do we support multiple frameworks, as we mentioned from the start, we support multiple runtimes as well. Whether you're using React Native, NativeScript, or even SSR stuff like Next and Tanstack Start, we have you covered. This is uncontrolled, right? Just to be 100% sure, Crutchcorn, that this in React Native isn't going to be a controlled input field. It is controlled. Someday. Controlled is better for most things. It is much worse for React Native in particular. React Native controlled inputs are rough. I love when posts like this exist. They're so helpful in understanding the intent of the authors. This is a philosophy post on the Tanstack Form docs. These pages are great. I would have been so much dumber talking about StyleX if it wasn't for the Thinking in StyleX page that described why this project exists. This rewired my brain meaningfully. And I'm excited to see the philosophy page here. Every well-established project should have a philosophy that guides its dev. Without a core philosophy, development can languish in endless decision-making and have weaker APIs as a result. This document outlines the core principles that drive the development and feature set of Tanstack Form. Upgrading unified APIs. APIs come with trade-offs. As a result, it can be tempting to make each set of trade-offs available to the user through different APIs. However, this can lead to a fragmented API that is harder to learn and use. While this may mean a higher learning curve, it means that you don't have to question which API to use internally or have higher cognitive overhead when switching between them. I think I agree, but you have to be careful because if you're not, this is also how you end up with the use effect problem, where use effect has two explicit arguments where you have the function you pass it and the array. If you don't pass the array, it behaves entirely differently in a way I would argue almost no one ever actually wants. But there's a third implicit argument where if you return a function in here, you can console.log cleanup, and this gets run when this gets cleaned up. Well, it won't because I forgot to put an empty array here because an empty array behaves entirely differently than opting out of the argument. This is an API that works for a lot of different things. In its current state, this is being used as an on mount. So console log on mount, and then here it's unmount. This is useful, but if we put a value here, it behaves entirely differently. If we don't put an array here, it behaves entirely differently. This is one API that does too many things. So unified APIs can be good. Yes, the learning curve is higher, but you also have to be careful to not stuff one API with too many behaviors because then it becomes more and more confusing to maintain. Crutchcorn's in here. They don't mean this in the way that we only have one API for everything, rather that they have one set of APIs rather than two entirely different. Like React Hook Form has register and controller, which are entirely different. That is a fair point. It's a tough line to walk, and thus far, it seems like you guys walked it very well here. I just wanted to call out that it's a thing you have to be careful with. You can't just stuff everything into one API and expect it to work. Use effect probably should have been 3 APIs. Back to the philosophy, there's a lot of good here. Forms need flexibility. Tanstack Form is designed to be flexible and customizable. While many forms may conform to similar patterns, there are always exceptions, especially when forms are a core component of your application. Yes, I'll never understand people who were convinced Formic was the end-all be-all solution. Formic was very much the provider of the components that you used. And if your stuff didn't fit their way of doing it, good luck, have fun. I also like the call out of without the tears. Stop crying over your forms. It's interesting that we all cry with forms because they are rough. Yeah. Formic was not the right abstraction, and there's a reason that its creator is deep in AI land now. Formic was not meant to survive. I don't even think he recommends it anymore. Yeah, we need flexible forms, and I'm thankful they went this route. As a result, Tanstack Form supports multiple methods for validation. You can do timing customizations, where you can validate on blur, change, submit, or even on mount. Validation strategies, where you can validate on individual fields, the entire form, or a subset of fields. Custom validation logic, where you can write your own validation using libraries like Zod or Valibot. Custom error messaging, obviously. And async validation. So if you want to do some asynchronous stuff like debouncing or handling it on a server or running something that's complex enough that it needs async behaviors, having all of that with one API is actually really, really cool. Controlled is cool. Okay. I agree. If you can do controlled, it's good. But in React Native, controlled inputs are rough. They do call it React Native here specifically because you don't have to worry about the lack of a DOM because you're not reading from a DOM elements ref, which is how you do uncontrolled inputs. I should probably show what I mean by controlled versus uncontrolled. Quick overview on controlled versus uncontrolled. Thank you, T3 Chat, for generating this. This is a controlled example. This form has its state, name, set name, all as a use state empty string. Handle change sets name to be the target value. And then we have on the input here, on change is bound to handle change. So whenever a change occurs, its value will be stored in the state and its value is set to name, which means on every key press, input is triggering this function, which updates React, thereby updating the content of this field in the form. So it's controlled because React is controlling what the input has in it. The form, so to speak, has its behavior and its values owned by React separately. This is nice because you never have to worry about the state between these two things falling out of sync, and it's also the simple, obvious way to do it. The key here to recognize is the submit function, where here submit just uses whatever value exists in React. Let's compare this to an uncontrolled form. Notice that we're missing a function here. We don't have an on change because on submit, we're not going to take the value from React. The value is just what exists in the browser. So we pass default empty string. We don't pass a value or an update function to input here because we're not controlling input. Input is an uncontrolled field. When you submit this form, we traverse it to find this field because we gave it a ref, name ref, for this input. So when we are actually submitting, we grab the value that currently resides on this and then use it. The benefit here is that we don't have to let React do things to update the value on the screen. The negative is we can't do things like validation until specific things are triggered, and we have to write those triggers ourselves separately. That lack of control, so to speak, makes it harder to build a good experience, but it also means you're less likely to accidentally cause the sticky keys problem where you're typing and React's taking too long to update the page, so you end up typing letters and not seeing them appear in the input. This is particularly rough in the React Native world right now. I have a whole video about this that I did a while back with Dan Abramoff complaining. So I understand this is the right way to do things, especially if you provide a performant enough API. But man, it'd be real nice in React Native in particular to have a good library that doesn't do this. I'm sure in the browser, it's not only good, but probably better than any alternatives. This is why they think going controlled makes sense. It's predictable because you can predict the state of your form at any point in time. It's easier to test. It works without a DOM. It has enhanced conditional logic, so you can show hide fields based on form state, stuff like that, as well as debuggability. It's so much easier to debug when all the state lives in React. Generics are grim. You should never need to pass a generic or use an internal type when leveraging Tanstack Form. This is because we've designed the library to inference everything from runtime defaults. I love this. Typing things properly in React Hook Form is an arcane wizardry thing. I've gotten decent at it over the years, but it's never easy or fun. This isn't to talk shit on RHF. It is a phenomenal library. If anything, the 2+ years it took to make Tanstack Form shows just how good RHF is. And apparently, the ability to avoid generics took us so long to figure out. It's a huge part of why this took so long. Makes a ton of sense. But as a result, you get really nice DX here. Default values, name, bill, age 24 as my form. So this is a type that has been defined so that you can add additional things that maybe aren't encoded in these default values. So if you have fields that aren't here, but you want to include them, make a type my form, as bind it there, good to go. One of the main objectives of Tanstack Form is that you should be wrapping it into your own component system or design system. To support this, we have a number of utilities that make it easier to build your own components and customized hooks. Interesting. So you also have the option to create your own use app form hook using their create form hook helper, so that whenever you call form.field, it will use the component that you've already built for it. That's really, really cool, actually. One more huge thing that most of these solutions don't really consider is the front-end back-end relationship, and I am so hyped to see them take this seriously with Tanstack Form. They have a first-class app router integration. So here, they're importing from the Next.js package for form options here. They create form options, and now we have a use server file, which means this is going to create a server validator. Here we're exporting the async function some action. We don't know what the previous state was, but we know form data, second field. We try, await, server validate, catch. If we get an error, we return the server validation error, otherwise we throw. Now we do whatever we want. Where this gets super cool is when we go into our client component. State, comma, action is the use action state React hook. I don't have the time to dive into that one here just yet. We have use form, and the use form call allows us to transform the state using our state call from this use action state here. We have form errors, which are use store. This is, I'm assuming, where's use store coming from? Nowhere. Grr. Keep your examples up to date, guys. I get it. There's a lot of code in this repo. Yeah. So you have the use store call, form.store, form states, form state.errors. That's how we get the errors out. Form, action, action as never. Gotta love fighting these types. But the benefit here is now we have the action that comes from our server-side code, all as a first-class citizen, letting us import a backend function in our client component, bind it to a form, validate each of the fields on client, but also handle all of these edge cases on server. That relationship between the client and the server side has never been stronger. Apparently, the as never was only here because React 19 hadn't shipped yet. And now that it has, it's not even necessary anymore. So convenient, so clean. Yeah, the only binding here is the on submit to form.handle submit. And if that wasn't to get hit because, JS hasn't loaded, the action will take over and still behave totally fine. But that's like the only on submit code that has to exist. And technically it's optional, which is really, really cool. It's dope to see like the server side being thought about and handled here. Obviously, Tanstack Start is a first class like citizen here. The Tanstack Start example's got to be nuts. Let's check it out quick. Create server validate, form options, on server validate, if value is less than 12. Server validation, you must be at least 12 to sign up. Handle form, create server function, method is post, validator. Oh, good old builder pattern. We love that. That server function is coming from Tanstack, right? Yeah, create server function is a Tanstack thing. So we create server function method post dot validator, data is unknown. If it's not an instance of form data, we throw an error, otherwise return the data, and we handle it by validating it. If there's an error, return the validation error. Otherwise, you return it has been successfully validated. This is so clean. A builder pattern for creating a server function that feels a lot like, the thing I love doing with TRPC right there, to create a function that is then super easy to use. You just have a way to grab the form data from server validates response using another server action. Yeah. Create server function get handler. This I'm a little more confused about. But the important part here is we create the route. We have our home. Use the loader data to get that default state. Const form is use form, form options, transform. Transform in a form library with the form options and the use form hook. I'm scared to think of how many times I've said form in this fucking video. Anyways, form errors, same deal. This is super clean. Like, how is this all of the code to bind the front end to the back end with proper form validation and management? In this one, as I said before, no on submit because it's not necessary because we bound it via the handle form.url call here. It's just all handled now. It's so good. And if you had the custom fields so you didn't have to do the syntax here, it'd be even cleaner. This is going to allow for actual maintainable form code for the first time like ever. And I'm genuinely really, really hyped about it. Here we have a simple form. God, the syntax is actually really, really nice. Use form, default value, first name, last name, on submit, console log, simple form example, form has an on submit on it. We do all the classic prevent default, stop propagations, and then finally form.handleSubmit. We have form.field, has its own custom validator here. If no value, then we have the error of first names required. If it's less than 3, first name must be at least 3 characters, otherwise undefined. Cool. Avoid hasty abstractions. Render props are great. I agree. So we have field here in children. This has all of the data. Field.name, which is the name of the given field. Label HTML4, field.name, first name. Input, ID is field.name. Name is field.name. Value, field.state.value. On blur, field.handleBlur. That is cool. We have a second field here, last name. Same deal, just none of the validation. Form.subscribe. Interesting. Not as familiar with this API yet. Children can submit is submitting. These are the different states that come from the selector. Oh, that's really nice, actually, because we don't want to have this update on all of the different states that could potentially change. So instead, we pass it this selector, almost like use effect where you're telling it, like, update when these change. Apparently, they have a better example. Thank you, guys, for catching that. People page, close. Cool. Use app form, simpler version. People form options. Form options, which is a reusable thing. That's actually very nice. Has default values for all of this stuff. We have that. We also have validators here. On change, value, error. If no full name is required. If no phone is required. On submit. Cool. And here, form on submit. Again, prevent default. Form handle submit. Form app field. Name, full name, children. Field.text field. Where's app field being defined? Let's go here. Okay, here we are. So we have in our custom create form hook declarations, a field component, a form component, and field and form context as well. And where are these coming from? All from form content. Cool. So this lets us create contexts that are now accessible within our custom components. I wish I saw what these were actually being used for. Yeah, field.component is a really nice pattern. It's cool having this thing returned from a hook that can be used as a component. I've used this pattern before and I thought it was a little dirty because I hadn't seen it enough. It's nice seeing others agree because this is much nicer. I've done this funny enough for form stuff in the past. I think this is really good DX. Okay, so fields can call the use field context hook, which is where things like the state value come from, which lets you write a generic field like this. So now this text field can be reused all over the code base however we want to for whatever we're building. And this custom text field definition can be accessed whenever we want now, whenever we call this form builder. And the field and form context are the things that populate this value when you call it. That makes more sense. Form.app field, name, first name, children. Yep. Notice app field instead of field. App field provides the required context. That makes sense. It not only allows you to reuse the UI of your shared components, but retain the type safety you'd expect from Tanstack Form. Typo name, and you'll still get a TypeScript error. Love that. They're using Tanstack Store to power the updates so that it doesn't have to re-render aggressively whenever things change in the context layer. That's very nice. App field solves many of the problems with field boilerplate and reusability. It doesn't solve the problem of form boilerplate and reusability. In particular, being able to share instances of form.subscribe for, say, a reactive form submission button is a common use case. So form.subscribe is disabled when submitting is happening. It has a label. You want to be able to use this button in multiple places. What's cool here is the form component for subscribe button can be passed. Now we can call form.subscribe button, label submit, and that will handle submissions for this form correctly. That is actually really, really nice. Breaking big forms into smaller pieces. Sometimes forms get very large. It's just how it goes sometimes. Yeah, so many of these libraries haven't been considerate of this. React Hook Form tries to, but splitting up a React Hook Form thing into multiple components is just not great. Tanstack Form supports large form as well. It's never fun to work with hundreds or thousands of lines of code long files, or God, 1,000+ line component. I've been there. Their solution is the with form hook. So we define child form here with form. These values are only used for type checking and they're not used at runtime. This allows you to triple.formops with form options without needing to redeclare them somewhere else. Optional, but adds props to the render function in addition to form. So we have a title, defaults to child form. And here we have form and title, p title, form app field, name first name, field, field.text field. You get the idea. But we pass form automatically by this with form call here. So now we know the render has access to form as one of its props, and we can write the component and do what we expect to there. All totally fine. Notice that there are 0 type defs here because all of this is inferred. That's what makes this really nice. Doing something like this in React hook form would have been hellish with the amount of type definitions you'd have to write. No type defs here. None at all. This whole thing, actually, this whole file example here, this is vanilla JavaScript. There is no types in here at all. This would work just as well in JS as TS as long as you have a decent editor setup because it's using inference properly. Inference is really good. Having to define your types everywhere fucking sucks. Now you don't have to. Now you can have a child form, pass it the current form, handle the subfields, and it just works. Why a hawk instead of a hook? While hooks are the future of React, hawks are still powerful tools for composition. In particular, the API of useForm enables us to have strong type safety without requiring users to pass generics. Is this supposed to be useForm or withForm? It needs to be withForm. Small typos. Why am I getting ESLint errors about hooks in render? ESLint looks for hooks in the top level of a function, and render may not be recognized as a top level component. Annoying. Tree shaking form and field components. Oh boy. While these above examples are great for getting started, they're not ideal for certain use cases where you might have hundreds of form and field components. In particular, you may not want to include all of your form and field components in the bundle of every file that uses your form hook. The fact this thinks out these giant code bases is really nice. If you're not familiar with what Tanner did before Tanner went full-time open source, his main project was Nozzle, which is a really complex dashboard for managing everything about your SEO for your enterprise products. This is not an easy product to build. It's a big part of why most of Tanner's tools exist now, because he was the lead, if not at times the only front-end dev at Nozzle, and he had to build everything to handle a code base as big, complex, and state-heavy as Nozzle. That's why he built things like React Query. That's why he built Tanstack Router to make it easier to manage the URLs and know that all of the right things are being passed to the components in the right way. That's why he made Tanstack Form, because the amount of different form fields on a page like this is enough to drive someone mad. And if your code base is big enough to really benefit from these, it's also big enough that you don't want to load every single field and every single component for every single form on every page with a form. Now you don't have to. You can just call lazy and suspense here and it's fine apparently. Deal function text field, lazy from React. Text field is a lazy import now. We can pass it here as normal and it behaves totally fine. So nice. Here's a nice, simple example. We've defined our custom text field, which uses field context in order to bind its input. We have a subscribe button, which is a reusable, just like text field, uses form context, and it has the selector for is submitting. And now we can use that to disable or enable the button here. Super nice. We have our custom app form here with the different field components and form components, as well as the context. We define form options to be used in multiple places. Now we have this child form, which dumps form options as part of its with form call. Also has a prop for its title. And now we have the render, where we'll render the title, as well as the app field with the name first name. And its child will be field.textField, the custom component that we defined. Form app form, same deal. Form.subscribe button, label submit. All works as expected. And then rendering it is real simple. Use app form, dump the same form options, child form, form equals form, title equals testing. So now that overrides the title and everything behaves as expected. That is super nice. Do you need to reuse the state like default values? Yes, then use form options. No. Do you need to reuse custom validation functions? Yes. Wrap use form hook into custom app. No. Do you need to reuse custom UI components? Yes. Create hook forms. No. You reuse the whole subsections. Yes. With form. No. Form subscribe. I like this a lot. A flow chart to help me decide which API I need to use is a really nice thing to throw into my company docs so that we do this correctly. Great. It's rare that a library comes out with all of these resources already created day one, and it really helps with the adoption here. I haven't used it yet, but I can say just looking at this pretty confidently, this is the thing we should look to as our default form library in React going forward. I genuinely can't imagine using another form library now. And huge shout out to the team, by the way. I've been bugging them for a while, And every time I was bugged, my answer was a default, by the way, I'm waiting until they tell me it's ready. And I got the DM yesterday from Crutchcorn. Hey, Theo, now's the time, with a link to the announcement. If they took 2 years to tell me that, now is the time. Give this library a shot. I am so hyped. I will absolutely be using this in the near future. And if something burns me, you guys will hear about it. But I would be very surprised if I had any problems that didn't get fixed within hours of me reporting them. I know how Tanner and his team work. They work really, really well. So once again, shout out to Crutchcorn, shout out to Tanner, shout out to everybody else working on this. And one final shout out to the React Hook Form team for being so supportive every step along the way, for not pretending that there isn't opportunity for people to innovate further, rather seeing these things, supporting the community efforts, and continuing to maintain a library that will be used in millions of apps for all of time. As Crutchcorn just said in chat, the Tanstack Form team loves the React Hook Form team. We shouldn't see this as an either or friends versus enemies. This is an attempt to take the lessons RHF taught us and push them and push the limits of them in a fully type-safe world. The level up going from Formic to React Hook Form was unbelievable. There's a reason we all moved over. I'm excited to see if Tanstack Form in practice has a similar level of, oh shit, this is way better. I cannot wait to see where we end up in the future. But for now, I finally have a form library I'm excited to use, and I can't remember the last time I was excited to write a form. Enough from me, though. I want to know what you guys think. Am I overhyping a form library, or are you going to start using this today? I can't imagine using anything else already, and I'm curious how you guys feel. Until next time, peace, nerds.